name is Amy Anderson, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumnae Relations. Before we begin today's session, please note that there will be time for questions towards the end of the presentation. So if you have anything to ask Interim President Hamen, please click the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen. Please note that you may need to exit out of full screen view in order to see the Ask a Question button. This session will be recorded and posted on our Alum Learning Consortium's past event recordings page in 3 to 5 business days. Now, please welcome our moderator for today's session, Kathy Hansen, Vice President of Institutional Advancement.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome and thank you to all of you who are joining us this evening for this conversation, the final episode in our summer St. Ben's at Home series. I know that you're all really eager to get to know our guest tonight, who is a very special guest, our new interim president, Laurie Hamen. This is, in fact, Laurie's very first day on the job, so we're really grateful that she was willing to take time with us tonight. You know, a couple of months ago when we started this series, we were all in the midst of, sheltering at home and being social distanced and not really spending as much time with people as I think Bennies are used to. And it really occurred to us that what better time could we have to bring St. Ben's to you, to share stories about what's going on, what's changing, talk about some of our amazing Bennies, give you a glimpse into what our future plans are. And I think probably most importantly, just to demonstrate that, as always, the Bennie Network is alive and well and thriving. So this is the 8th and the final episode in the summer series. We hope it will inspire you, educate you, and entertain you. So I will start tonight with some questions. And as Amy said, we'll leave plenty of time at the end of the hour for your questions. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to jump right in, Laurie. You are not unknown in these parts. You have a history with St. Ben's. And so I would love it if you could share with everyone a little bit about your history and connections with the College of St. Benedict.
You bet. Well, and first, Kathy, thank you for doing this. It's a wonderful opportunity, even on your very first day. So thank you. I really appreciate it. In the 90s, I was the Dean of Students at St. Ben's. It was a tremendous experience, professional experience in my life. Educated at a women's college. I always wanted to work at a women's college. And so getting the job at St. Ben's was such a treat. So I was here for 4 or 5 years and in St. Joe. And subsequently, both of my sons were educated at St. John's, and eventually one of my sons married a wonderful Bennie. And so we have many, many family connections and professional connections, and I'm thrilled to be back.
Thank you. It's great. I hope it feels a little bit like coming home.
It absolutely
glad
does.
to have you. I know that those listening tonight want to get to know you a little bit more, even as a person, right? And I'd love to hear more about your family. I do know that you are a super grandma, which I totally respect. So tell us about your family and maybe some of the things you enjoy doing in your free time, if that's even a thing for college presidents.
Yes. Well, I have 8 grandchildren under 8. So my oldest son has 4. My middle son, James, lives in Florida. He has 2, and my daughter, Maddie, has 2. So one of the absolute joys of my life is spending time with those little ones. And part of wanting to work at a women's college is to make absolutely sure that for those little girls, that there is strong women's colleges, especially in the Benedictine tradition, liberal arts tradition, that are available to them, accessible to them when they get ready to go to college. So I love being a grandma, that's for darn sure. When I have time, besides playing with them, I love to read. And in fact, you might get tired of me giving book recommendations. I like to bike and walk. And spend time with my husband, Bill, who will move the rest of our stuff up to St. Joe over the weekend. So family's important, lifelong learning, clearly really, really important to me. And those and some sports and exercise. I'm a huge sports fan, so I'll love to watch our Bennies play. And I'm so glad that Renner House is situated about an inch from our new field. It's going to be great.
This may be a controversial question, but do you have some pro sports teams that you follow, and are they Minnesota teams?
They are, of course they are. Yes, I was a little bit of an outcast in Iowa the last 6 years, loving the Twins so much and the Vikings. But now I'm back in my home state, so I can say that I love hockey, baseball, and I love to watch the Vikings too.
Oh,
so we'll hope for a good season.
Yeah,
but I'm going to love Bennies the most.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to welcome your granddaughters to St. Ben's as students someday. So
yes,
we'll look forward to that. You know, another thing about your personal story is that you are a lawyer by training, and I'm not sure that everybody knows that. So I'm wondering, as you think about kind of this upcoming year, how do you imagine your legal skills coming into, you know, being an asset as you lead the college?
Sure. Well, anyone who goes to law school knows that having that training allows you to have a way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you ever practice law or you don't, you have for the rest of your life a way of looking at things with evidence in mind and with an argument in mind. I think that those are essential skills for a college president, in that when you make decisions, you want to be able to trust the decisions that people make. And so I like to ask for data. I like a good argument. And I don't mean an argument between humans, but I like a good, well-reasoned argument.
Mm-hmm.
And law really at its basis, besides teaching how to think, teaches you also how to help people. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that lawyers do is certainly advise and counsel and help people maximize or derive the most positive benefit out of their lives that they can. So it teaches you also about justice and fairness and the completion of something to the satisfaction many times of all parties. So, I've really valued it. And when I look at what's on a president's desk, things like employment and contracts and creating an atmosphere of justice and equity, those are all really important things for a college president to know how to do.
And we'll dig into some of those a little bit later in this conversation. But I mean, as you describe the law and kind of thinking like a lawyer, it does sound like tailor-made to leading an institution like ours. So that's
I've
great.
always done education law also. And so, I think that's been beneficial. I've not done corporate. So it's always been applied to an education setting.
Great. Well, that's perfect. So let's talk a little bit about that role, this role of interim president. Not everybody may really know what it means to be an interim president, what that role is all about. So it'd be interesting to hear from you as you step into this role. What do you see the role of an interim president, and how's it different from being like a permanent president?
Sure. Well, an interim president obviously has a contract for a certain period of time or until a certain set of circumstances take place. And so in this case, following Mary Hinton, what a fabulous person. But there needed to be some additional time as the board explores stronger integration between St. John's and St. Ben's and the model of having one president. And so an interim president a lot of times serves at a time where there needs to be a little bit more thought about something before a president can be selected permanently. Sometimes they are selected also to be somewhat of a change agent. And I think that is a beneficial role for an interim president, but also as a way paver. So to try to pave the way for a person to come in with some potential changes afoot. And I think that that's the case at St. Ben's at the moment. Generally, a board would want to select somebody who might have had the experience of being a president, so they're not necessarily learning on the job in a short period of time. And frankly, I was about to retire from Mount Mercy University and spend some more time with my family. I told Kathy earlier that there's really only two places I would have not retired for, and St. Ben's is one of them. And so it became my surprise job. And in very many ways, this interim job is a little bit of a dream job for me at a place that I love.
I'm guessing that you reflect on the idea of calling, right? And I think there is something about people being called to particular places at particular times with particular experiences, right? And I think this could very much be a calling for you.
Very much
We're
so.
often surprised by our calls, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think God loves to surprise us in many ways.
Absolutely. So you mentioned earlier that this was one of two places, and it's okay to say the other place. It's
Oh,
St.
sure.
Kate's, your alma mater.
Yes, my alma mater.
We
That's
know
right.
St. Kate's well. So were there specific things about St. Ben's that really drew you to that job? I mean, the nature of the challenges right now. You mentioned the work towards stronger integration, a single president, but there's also a lot of challenges right now with COVID-19 and things like
Absolutely.
that. What drew you to the job?
Well, I think I think about the fact that as a person who went to a women's college a little bit accidentally, I didn't go there to think about how much it would change my life.
Okay.
And I see the historical effect of a women's college education. And so I obviously felt a need to pay it forward to a certain extent. And a women's college does something that I think that you talk about, and we talk about at St. Ben's all the time, which is to lead courageously and advocate passionately and think critically. Well, if you think that leadership is about an easy time or an easy way, then courage isn't really necessary. And so I think St. Ben's teaches persons, and particularly teaches women, how to lead in both the best of times and the worst of times. And I'm not saying we're at either one of those extremes, but there's clearly challenges we've never faced before. We've never had a global pandemic. We've never been at a spot in higher education where we had to prove our relevancy.
Mm-hmm.
We've probably not been in a place where the need for diversity and equity and justice was as great as it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things are an opportunity, I think, to lead courageously if we can possibly do it. And that's not a mission to run away from. That's a mission to run to.
That's great to hear. I want to follow up on your comment about the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. We've had some conversations about this together already, and I'm really encouraged about what I hear you say. You've already said, I think, to the search committee, I remember in those conversations and in other conversations that diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice is a key priority for you this upcoming year. So, as I think about this year in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the subsequent protests that have happened around the world and, of course, are continuing to happen, what can you tell us about how St. Ben's is responding to that and what your role will be in helping lead us in becoming an anti-racist community?
You bet. Well, as I look at the report on becoming community and the words of transformational inclusion, that's something that I want to be a part of. And so I can't say on my very first day I know everything that I will do, and nor do I know everything that has been done. I think Brandon and staff have done a marvelous job, and the Mellon Grant has assisted us in bringing us closer and closer to a transformative and inclusive community. But obviously, we have work to do. And what I can say today is that I am committed to doing that work and to getting involved in the things that are happening at St. Ben's and creating new things that allow us to be really true to our Benedictine heritage of justice and hospitality and love and commitment to one another. I know that there's much that's happened already. And so the more that I can get familiar with the things that are happening, the really excellent work that's being done in terms of transforming our community to include and celebrate all different kinds of people, there are a lot of priorities. And I think that in the next very short period of time, we're going to send out some things that will outline not only what we have done over the last year in this regard, but what we intend to do in the future, including some scholarships that I think will ask alums to be a part of, and that we'll certainly make a commitment to. Mentoring, there's all kinds of things. And I guess what I would say is more to come, and I will be in touch with our alumni very shortly about what we intend to do along with our folks at St. John's.
So many of our alumni have stepped up and challenged us, I think, in responding to these times. And I know that you welcome their leadership in pushing us on this. I mean, I think our alums are allies, our alums and donors and other friends are allies in this work. And
I've been actually very heartened by the petitions that I've received, two now, one asking for a scholarship in honor of George Floyd, and one asking for us to continue the motion that we've made in terms of equity and justice. And I'm looking forward to responding.
That's great. Good. I want to flip to another kind of challenge that we're facing now. You've mentioned it before. Unprecedented is a word that gets used a lot, and we're kind of tired of it in some ways. But in fact, we have an unprecedented set of circumstances related to the global pandemic.
Yes.
What can you tell us about how St. Ben's is responding to the challenges and the demands of COVID-19? Provost Richard Ice was on our one of our episodes here probably a month ago or so, and he spoke at that time about some of the plans for what we might be doing over the summer and this fall, but things change on a weekly, even daily basis. So a lot has happened since then. So what can you tell us about what St. Ben's is going to be doing to respond to the pandemic, and what teaching and learning is going to look like at St. Ben's?
Well, I'm really interested and enthused about what teaching and learning and our faculty and our academic administration has stepped up in such a wonderful way. If you didn't hear Richard, you might not know that we're going to be doing a one course at a time schedule for this entire year. And so individuals that are students at St. Ben's will take one course and then 2, 3, and 4 during the first semester, in also a high flex model. So if a student was ill and needed to be quarantined, they would still be able to join their in-person course online. So
can you say more about high flex? What does that mean exactly?
High flex means that the way that you access the course would be flexible. You could be there in person, you could be there online, you could be a part of it. And so the instructor might be in person, might be online. There's many ways for us to access the learning that will take place in community. So I think it's been extraordinarily well thought out, but it requires our faculty to do a tremendous amount of work. And as you know, we're very much into quality of academic work. And so I have to say thank you tremendously to our faculty who have reconstructed all of their courses for this type of learning. And that was not an easy feat. It is not an easy feat. I think that this will be beneficial for students, particularly because I've not heard from a single student that doesn't want to come back face to face if they can possibly do it. But also recognizing that safety and community safety is tremendously important. So one has to be able to be flexible to have the best possible situation where if you can be back in person in a way that we do it at St. Ben's. But if you must transition either for a very short time or a longer period of time to online, you'll be able to do that. So I think it's the best of every situation. It'll be really beneficial. Obviously we've stepped up things like testing and wearing masks and cleaning and all of the kinds of things that will cause it to be a good community situation. And we're continuing to work every day to figure out how to do all of the community things that we love to do in the safest, most beneficial way possible.
I know that our focus this summer is very much on all resources being directed toward making the campus safe for students, faculty, and staff to return this fall in whatever way is possible. And one of the things I think the one course at a time model is really interesting. Some of you listening may know about Cornell College in Iowa or Colorado College, and the fact that they do this all the time, one course at a time. And so we have, I think, representatives from both of those schools that we have retained to come on campus and help teach our faculty how to teach in this way. So
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. It certainly cuts down on the exposure of many, many people to other people. And so we'll be able to do that contact tracing that's necessary should someone get ill. And I think it provides the in-person possibilities while keeping those to a manageable level. And we'll be able to get that experience.
The other thing that it really minimizes too is travel on the link, the bus back and forth between the campuses, which is a huge issue for transmission of the disease. And it was, it's really virtually impossible to keep the buses, you know, as sort of clean as they need to be in order to be safe to travel in. And having one class at a time certainly minimizes the amount of time that people are traveling back and forth. So it's interesting. We are learning as we go, definitely.
Student experience, yeah. The entire student experience gets rethought to a certain extent. So it's been an interesting experience.
Definitely. I want to switch to a topic that is very close to my heart. Yesterday, we successfully completed the largest fundraising campaign in the college's history. We set out to raise $100 million through the Illuminating Lives campaign. We ended up at about over $112,900,000 toward that $100 million goal. So we're super excited. Our alums, I think over a third of our alumni made a gift to the campaign at some point during the campaign. And of course, many thousands of other friends and organizations that support St. Ben's contributed as well. So it was a great celebration to be able to, bring that to a successful conclusion. So during this interim year, I'm wondering, what do you see your role being when it comes to fundraising?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank all the alums that are listening who made a gift to this campaign or to the annual fund. Large or small, you don't know how your gift is impacting our Bennies. It's really amazing. I know many people who would say that they could never come to school here should there not be a scholarship in your name. They see all of the things that we've been able to do with the physical plant, and they're thankful, and I'm thankful. And so I just wanted to express my gratitude because it's really a tremendous achievement. So what do I see my role as? Well, first of all, I think my role is chief storyteller for the institution, the ability to be able to match needs that we have at St. Ben's and passion that people have for particular areas of growth in the institution.
Right.
So I think it's a little bit of a matchmaker also in terms of really listening to what our alums are deeply committed to. And Kathy always says she works with happy, generous people, and I would add happy, generous, and committed people.
Yes.
And so I guess my role is really to meet those committed people and those happy, generous people, and to help them find out what they're really passionate about, what would be exciting for them to be a part of. Many years ago, I would have said that fundraising was not something that I would ever want to do. In fact, I told a friend a long time ago, a professional friend, that I would rather eat a dearth sandwich than ask someone for a gift. And what I have found over many years of talking with individuals about institutions that I've been at, that it's one of the most satisfying parts of the job, to be able to hear stories of people and how St. Ben's has changed their lives, and then match their interests with things that are happening on campus. It is a deep privilege, for one thing, but it's also a wonderful time. So I'm looking forward to when it's safe to do so, talking to lots of people and listening to lots of folks, and both telling our story and hearing your story.
Oh, that's great. I have to say, I loved hearing you use the image of matchmaker. as your role, because it's something I've said too, that I consider ourselves yentas, actually, right? And we're the ones who make that match between the mission of an organization and the calling of the individual, right? And where you find that point of intersection, tremendous, wonderful generosity can happen. So we're yentas. Right. We'll be yentas together.
Hey, that sounds great.
Good. Let's also dig into another, we've alluded to it earlier in the conversation, but a big focus of your work for the upcoming year, which is, of course, St. Ben's strong integration or coordination with St. John's and moving toward a single president. So that involves lots of parties, our boards, it involves our St. John's leadership, but you will play an important leadership role as well. So what do you see your role being in all of that?
Well, I love women's colleges. I never want to see anything diminish the power and the historic power and effect of a women's college education. So first and foremost, I think my role is to continue to preserve St. Ben's women's college mission and making it real every single day. And the stronger that we are with that mission, the better partner we can be in strong integration with St. John's. So I think first and foremost, that's what I'll need to do, is to continue to make sure the identity and the advantages of the identity as a Bennie are lifted up for everyone. And then to really begin to understand how a partner with St. John's can continue to move forward. So I think there's lots of opportunity here, because my sons are Johnny's. It's personal, but it's also professional. We're living in a higher ed world right now where there's a lot of pressure to really be able to communicate what you offer. And we have something extraordinarily unique here as a strong, thriving women's college near a strong, thriving men's college. And I think we have a lot to share, a lot to say, a lot to sell to young people. And so bringing that integration together seems to me to be a really exciting venture. And I think that because it has been driven to a certain extent by our board, it's really a vision of the leadership of the board. So I'm anxious to continue to be a part of it. I know that it's unique and almost so unique that it might be the kind of thing that is a little harder for our accreditation bodies to really understand. But I'm looking forward to be able to make the case that a strong women's college can be in a stronger, integrated, coordinate relationship with St. John's and thrive equally in that relationship.
That ability to make a strong, persuasive case, again, that draws on your legal skills, right? Your training, because that's exactly what you do.
And while we're recruiting students in an age where you really, particularly with traditional aged students, there has to be something unique and special about your institution. And I think that there is something unique and special about teaching women to think critically and live a courageous life and to lead and advocate passionately. But I think there's something double unique about doing that in a context that focuses on gender and has a strongly integrated, because frankly, that's the world you'll be living in as a professional woman. And so I think that there's a lot to be gained there, and I think a lot to be sold.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit. Not everyone listening may know that one of the roles that you played when you were at North Central University in the Chicago area was that you were in charge of enrollment. And you've mentioned this is such an important issue for us now, and one that it's essential that we be effective in strengthening. So as you look ahead, and again, I know just stepping in from the outside a little bit, what do you see as the kind of first the challenges, I guess, but then there's usually corresponding opportunities, right, to those challenges. So what do you see that looking like for us next year?
Yeah, well, I think there's always the challenge of demographics at this moment, where the demographics of the 18 to 22-year-old population are shifting, changing, decreasing to a certain extent. And that's our bread and butter at St. Ben's. So I do think that there's executing really well on your enrollment plan is, essential. And also using our alums in ways that are beneficial. I mean, I would say that the storytellers that actually really matter for many of our prospective students are the voices that we hear from our alumni and friends. You're the trusted source of information about a life well lived and having it be formed at the college that you went to. So I'm anxious to continue to partner with our alumni to really be able to sell an experience at St. Ben's that has an effect right when you graduate, but also has a continuing historic positive effect and helps people continue to see that their life and professional career was impacted positively by coming to St. Ben's. So we will be searching for more applicants, certainly. We'll do a lot of the personalized things that we have always done. But now we have an opportunity also to do some virtual things that we've never had an opportunity to before. And so we've gotten, pretty good at the virtual visits and, connecting with international students and so forth. So I'm looking forward to digging into our enrollment plan and to be able to really assist in terms of moving that forward. A thriving institution is generally a growing institution. And so I'm looking forward to really being able to put a little additional oomph, I guess, into what's happening in really good work in enrollment at St. Ben's right now.
That's so important. And we know that it's a campus-wide effort, right, to be truly successful in enrollment. And I know even on our academic side, we've worked to create some programs, new programs that have been effective, like data analytics and exercise science major and possibly looking at graduate programs and all of that. So there certainly are some opportunities.
Yeah, we have to take our signature programs and expand certainly to make sure that we really are as relevant as we can possibly be to an 18-year-old student right now looking for a great place to go to school, and continue to tell our story in the best way possible and the widest range possible. I think there's also another aspect that's really important here, and that is financial aid and scholarships, to make sure that we are accessible to the broadest possible range of individuals who want to come to St. Ben's. So, that's also another aspect of this. There may be people who want to come, but either aren't able to afford it and or need some assistance before they can do that. So all of the kinds of programs in aid, but also the kinds of inclusive programs, the mentoring programs that we offer. I want to be the kind of place that is appealing to a lot of different types of students, and that requires us to be open to programs and services and financial aid that may be targeted towards a very broad range of women.
It's I have to give a little plug here for just some generous donors that created the Fleischacker Center for Ethical Leadership and Action as a result of this campaign. And because of that, now we're able to provide stipends for summer fellowships for students that would otherwise not have been able to afford to take an unpaid internship during the summer. And we know that internships are so important for their career readiness. So
all of those experiential learning opportunities. So internships, absolutely. But certainly our volunteer experiences, our study abroad experiences, our research experiences, and our leadership programs, all of those things kind of total up to the student experience that one comes to expect at St. Ben's. How to communicate that with an 18-year-old student is really important, but to make sure that they know that those things are available for them, and that not only can they can do it financially, but also it's going to maximize their potential in ways that they have never even thought of.
That's so great. It's interesting too, because we hear from alumni fairly regularly that when they were 17 or 18 and choosing a college, they didn't necessarily understand fully the impact that being at a college for women would have on them. But actually during their years at St. Ben's, but also early on in their careers, they quickly saw the benefits to them and their own leadership development, career development.
Yeah.
So it's
I went to a women's college really because I got a great scholarship. Yeah. So in some ways, I understand a student who might, come here not necessarily knowing what they're going to get into, but if we can support students in many ways, and I know we do, then I think we'll continue to grow and thrive.
I want to ask just a couple more questions before we turn it over to questions from the audience. And one is that, being a president is just hard work, demanding, challenging work, right? So what are some of the ways that you find to kind of maintain and support your physical health, your mental, spiritual health, keep your positive spirit going and your energy up? What are some of the ways you do that?
Sure. Well, I majored in home ec at St. Kate's, if you can imagine that. That was a long time ago when they were teaching that, but it did teach me some really important things. Before it was all that cool, I guess, to think about your physical health. I was thinking about the nutrition that supports that physical health, and I feel like I really was blessed by having that education. So I try to eat right and get exercise and get a good night's sleep every night. It sounds so simple, but it's really true. I also have been blessed with maybe a high energy is a good way of putting it. My husband might describe it differently, but high energy is probably it. But I really do like to escape into the world of books occasionally, or like I said, into the world of grandkids. And I do that fairly regularly. A number of years ago, I did a short mini triathlon, and I'm sort of thinking maybe I'd like to do one of those again sometime soon. Well, stay tuned on that one.
Hats off. That's great.
Yeah, we'll see if I can actually manage that. But I'm also a praying person, and so it's important to me to take time to pray and to read scripture. That's a really important part of my life of faith. And without that aspect, I think I would not be able to continue to put myself into the kind of work that I do and do it at a high level.
Well, I've got one more question before we turn it over, and I'm feeling a little bad about it because it's not exactly in the spirit of healthy eating. So I'm going to say that. But it is the question that we close, or not close, but we ask all of our guests to answer. Now, this is your first day, so you probably haven't even had a chance to taste some of these yet. But we always ask the choice between Bennie bars, or as you would have known them when you were Dean of Students, yes, they would have been called Special K bars, yes, or chocolate lava cake. Which are you looking forward to tasting first?
You know what? I remember the days when you went down into the basement in the main building to the little dining rooms. And so I remember the Bennie bars really well. Unfortunately, I'm gluten-free and chocolate-free. So I'm going to have to say neither, which is so upsetting. But boy, there are some fabulous other things that I remember very, very well that I'd love to come back and taste.
We have great dining services, so you'll enjoy being over at
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So right now, why don't we open it up to questions from the audience? Amy, have we received any questions from Laurie?
Yes, we've received several. The first one comes from Sharon and Jim, and it's a two-part question. The first half is, what in the CSB mission, vision, and strategic directions are the most reflective of your educational values? And then the second half is, As you reflected on the vision and strategic directions during your hiring interviews, did you contemplate changes?
Mhm. Well, first of all, I think that in the strategic direction, the thing that resonated with me the most was the Benedictine Catholic heritage of the institution. I've worked for a lot of different orders. I've worked with just recently the Mercies, of course, and I worked for the Christian Brothers, worked for the Benedictines before, and was educated by Sisters of St. Joseph, and at DePaul and the Vincentians. And one of the things that I recognize is that my education was so tied up in the mission of the Dear Neighbor at St. Kate's, and how important it was to me to apply what I learned in context of community. That was extraordinarily important. So when I look at the aspects of the strategic plan, they're about Benedictine and Catholic. It, to me, the context in which we are teaching students and in which we are learning together is a particular type of context, and it requires us to understand the Catholic intellectual tradition, which goes back thousands of years, and Catholic social teaching, which is on which the Benedictines have based their lives. And so that resonated with me probably the most. I think it is reflected in Benedictine values of hospitality and justice and so forth, where we take what we learn and we apply it to our community. And we apply it in particular ways. So I think if you just talk about resonance, that is definitely the area that resonated the most with me. About changes. You know, it's always very dangerous on your very first day to talk about any changes that you would like to make because you run the risk always of being short in the information department. But I guess again, I look at the context that we're in right now, and I say, I think that moving towards the most inclusive community that we can have at St. Ben's, where we are transformed by the concept of justice, isn't a change, because I think that that's already happening at St. Ben's, but I wouldn't mind accelerating that aspect of what we're already doing, and to try to do my best to continue to walk down that path, maybe even more quickly and thoroughly than we have already.
And that, of course, is very much rooted in our Benedictine values too. We've talked about respect for all persons, and hospitality as being very much about how we approach that work.
Yeah.
Amy, are there other questions for Laurie?
Yes, our next question comes from Christy. Excuse me. And she asks, what role do you see the faculty playing as the institutions move to a new structure and single president?
Well, the faculty, you know, obviously we share governance with our faculty. It's an important part of what St. Ben's has been about for forever. I think the faculty always has a say in what happens. When you think about, that's the heart of our institution, is the educational expertise and the commitment that our faculty play over a lifetime. So certainly we would like them to be involved in the conversation. This particular conversation has started with the board and will continue to include more and more and more individuals, including our faculty, who are represented on our board and who have participated in some of the joint, the JSBC conversations that we've had. So I would welcome faculty input on the strong integration model that we're taking and moving towards. And I really look forward to their, what I think is always just a tremendous brain power applied to this new model.
Mm-hmm. And they, of course, have been fully joint for decades, really, right? And so
yes.
They bring that.
Yeah, our faculty might even be beyond.
I think
they
so.
might be beyond some of the the conversation that is happening.
Mhm.
And I look forward to hearing what they have to say.
Great. Amy, other questions?
Yes, this one is kind of in the same line. It comes from Becky, and she asks, what is the primary benefit of the colleges consolidating to one president?
I think that there's a number of benefits. One is certainly an administrative and or an administrative benefit where I think we would have certain joint sets of goals, and we would be working perhaps a little bit more together on those goals. I think that there is clearly an administrative benefit. There's probably also a benefit as it relates to kind of a vision question. I think that St. John's, St. Ben's will always have visions that are parallel because of their single gender, being single gender institutions. But I think that there's probably some areas in which their vision could be more closely aligned. So having a single president might facilitate that. I think that there's many reasons why a single president would be beneficial, and I know that I will learn more and more about that as I continue to walk on. But I think that they're primarily vision, administrative, and leadership benefits. I think that there are some tremendous leadership benefits in having one person who might be the key message, the key storyteller for both institutions, so long as the distinctive single gender identities can be preserved.
Good. Thanks, Laurie. Amy?
Yes, Danielle asks, how do you hope to be connected to current students in the year ahead?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it is a giant perk of a college president to be able to go to student events. I have already mentioned that I love athletics, but I have two sisters who are musicians and artists, and I've always loved to go to student both music, art, theater events. I'm looking forward to all of it. I think that there's nothing better as a college president to see someone come in as a first-year student and watch them excel in all kinds of areas, in leadership areas and in their academic areas, and see them 4 years later cross the stage as a completely transformed person. I am really looking forward to having that in a shorter period of time. So I'll go to events. I'm sure I'll get to know students. I'm absolutely certain I will invite them to Renner House. And I am really looking forward to being able to hear student stories. I think the very best ways to connect with alums and community members and others is to be able to firsthand know a student's story and to be able to recount it to someone who's interested in the college. So I'm looking forward to being where students are. I had an active social media presence at my last institution, so I'm contemplating whether I will continue to tweet and Instagram and all of the things where students expect me to be electronically in the virtual world, but I'll certainly be where they are also. It is my primary perk as a college president.
Your background in student development obviously plays right into this. You have a great deal of experience meeting students where they are.
Yes.
Our Bennies are wonderful, so
yeah,
you'll love that. Amy, are there more questions for Laurie?
Yes, Anne asks, how do you feel your previous experience working at CSB will help you working here as the interim president?
One of the things that happened just today is I met several people that I knew in the 90s. And so one of the things that is beneficial is not everyone has to be introduced to you. And certainly I have an understanding of the campuses. I have an understanding of the way the joint or coordinate relationship works. I think that takes a bit of time to understand. So that's truly an advantage to be able to say that you know what the coordinate relationship is. I think last but not least, having family members whose lives were literally transformed at St. Ben's and at St. John's provides you with a vision of what could happen when students take full advantage of all the things that are available to them at St. Ben's. So I think knowing people, knowing your way around, knowing the coordinate relationship, and knowing the outcomes that are so important for our young women, all of those things I think will help me get up to speed more quickly. And with an interim job, the more that you know before you come, the better.
Right. You know, I'm going to interrupt with another follow-up question to that. I know, of course, since you had sons who graduated from St. John's, you've been back to the campuses and seen some changes all along, but still, it must look quite a bit different than what you remember, you know.
Oh goodness.
Comment about that?
Absolutely. Every time I walk into a building at St. Ben's, I think to myself, oh my goodness, it didn't look like this in the 90s. So, you know, so many things have been so thoroughly updated or so thoroughly renovated. My office was actually in Mary Commons. Oh, so I'm just coming right back to, to Mary Commons. It's been really such a treat though, to see the unbelievable changes and the really positive physical changes everywhere on campus, but yet the heart and soul of St. Ben's is still the same. And that's what's really pleased me no end, is to see just all of the things that have been done, the ways that people have been tremendously generous. And I see the upgrades that have happened, which are absolutely critical to a 2020 education. But the heart and soul of St. Ben's is still the same.
Great. Amy, are there other questions?
Absolutely. This one comes from an anonymous person, but they ask, thinking back to when you were in college, what are some pieces of advice you would tell your 18-year-old self that you would share or desire to pass on to incoming students?
First of all, if you would have told my 18-year-old self that I would be a college president someday, I actually probably would have laughed. Oh no, I certainly would have laughed. I was just a girl from the east side of St. Paul. I didn't even really know anything about leadership. I would have never guessed that I would be a college president. And of course, you go to a place where women have role models and where they are called to be their best self, where they're called to be excellent women, and something really transformational happened. So I guess I would say more than anything, my 18-year-old self did not know how to test the limits of her ability. And until I went to a place that caused me to test the limits of my ability, I didn't grow in the ways that I could have. So my 18-year-old self, I would say stretch, grow, do the thing you think you cannot do. Almost all limits are really self-imposed, and find mentors that will stretch you and grow you and not allow you to accept limitations that you've placed upon yourself, and study hard. That would be my trust the process. Your faculty members know what they're doing. Student affairs and student development people will help you create a life that you want, but just dig in and test yourself. That's what I would say.
Can you think of an example of, like, during your time at St. Kate's, where you really took a risk or pushed yourself, tested your limits, that had a big impact?
You know, I think they were almost all academic. I didn't do a lot of leadership at St. Kate's. I was a commuter student. And so I didn't have the residential experience, which I wish desperately that I would have had, because I think it would have been really a tremendous, that's one thing I've appreciated so much at St. Ben's, is that the residential experience is so good and so hearty, and there's so much that you can learn there. But I studied all the time. Now at the very end of my senior year, I became the president of a club. And it was a little bit of a step of faith for me, because I'd never done anything like that before. I had no idea how to do anything, write an agenda, get people to do anything. And it was an academic club. So that was a big step for me, because basically I worked a lot and I studied a lot and I lived at home. And that's not exactly the recipe for a tremendous leader. So it was good for me to take that risk of running an academic club in my senior year, and I'm glad I did it.
Great. Amy, do we have more questions?
Yes. Shannon asks, what is a favorite memory or interaction from your time working at St. Ben's previously?
I had a wonderful experience. I took a small group of people. I think I had only been at St. Ben's for a couple of weeks. We have a way of sort of getting people to dive right into the deep end, but I'd been at St. Ben's for a few weeks, and I had to take a group of people on a leadership excursion to a camp up in northern Michigan. And we had a fabulous time. We learned so much. I was a group of people who were involved in student government and so forth, but it was probably the coldest week of my life. It was freezing. I wore all the clothes that I had in my suitcase. It was in the summer, but I wore all the clothes that I had in the suitcase with me, on me for the entire time. It was an amazing experience of leadership. And I got to know, I think there was probably about 15 of us that went. And I had the pleasant, wonderful experience the other day of talking to some folks in Alumni Relationship, in Alumni Relations. And there was one of the students that I had gone to Michigan with back in the 90s who remembered the freezing cold week that we spent together learning about leadership. It was fabulous.
Many of the folks listening, I think, might know who Laurie is talking about. It's Valerie Jones, who's our executive director of Alumni Relations. So I know that was a meaningful experience for both of you, as well as a chilly one.
Yes.
Amy, more questions for Laurie?
Yes, I think we have time for one more question. Jen asks, looking back a year from now, what do you want to see and how will you know the year has been a success?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a person who likes to measure. So I would say the year will be a success if we are measurably better in terms of thriving, have additional students. Our budget is in a good place, that there's a financial component, certainly with something like COVID, that, I'll be very happy if we are measurably better in that regard. Second, I'll be very happy if we have weathered that pandemic well, and our students still really see a strong community, even though we've had to have some distance between us. Third, I would say I would like to see us have a measurable result in terms of our drive towards transformational inclusiveness, equity and diversity, and anti-racism. If we are significantly further along in that particular area, particularly in equity and social justice and anti-racism, I would be very happy. And if we are measurably in a more strong alignment with our colleagues at St. John's, I think all of those things would have been a great success.
Well, thank you, Laurie. We would love to actually check back in with you this fall and maybe do another St. Ben's at Home. So will that fit into your schedule, we hope? So we'll
I would love it.
It'll be a chance.
Thank you all so much.
Oh, thank you. I think that's all the time we have this evening for our questions and for this conversation with Laurie. So Laurie, I do thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening and to introduce yourself to so many of our alumni and friends. Doing this on your very first day means a lot. Thank you also to those of you who are in the audience watching and listening. We're really grateful that you've joined us as well. Laurie and I are going to log off, and I encourage you to stay on for some final comments for Amy and maybe some details about the fall St. Ben's at Home series that we have planned. So thanks to all of you for being a part of this.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.